Alright guys, so you already see the title of the video, you know where this is going. Now I will say in the original making of this video, it was going to be 5 things Kaiserreich does better than Vanilla HOI4, but after looking into some of the differences between Kaiserreich and Vanilla HOI4, there's just too much to mention and I feel like leaving out any of it would be a shame. Now when I say this, I don't mean HOI4 is a bad game or Paradox is just bad. There's just things Kaiserreich does way better than HOI4. And after having played a fair amount of hours in this game, and I'd say about 50% of those hours being Kaiserreich alone, there's definitely some differences that I have noticed. Already right off the bat, the nation selection UI is just way cleaner in Kaiserreich. You have all the different major nations lined up here, kind of each representing their own ideology, and you also have minor nations below that kind of correlate with some of these bigger nations here. Whereas I feel like with Vanilla HOI4, they just kind of slap every nation that has a focus tree at the bottom. No design whatsoever, and just no categorization. It's not a big deal, and it doesn't even affect the gameplay at all. But I feel like just the attention to detail Kaiserreich has, it just feels like there's more love put into it. And before continuing this video, I just want to say there is a ton of changes to Kaiserreich. It's almost become its own game at this point, so it really isn't fair entirely to compare this to Vanilla HOI4. But there's simply some things that are just ridiculous that Vanilla HOI4 has not incorporated yet. And I could take the time to mention all the quality of life changes that Kaiserreich has added, but that would take me years, and I'm trying to keep this video a little short. Starting with one of our first things that Kaiserreich does better, politics. And I don't just say this in a way because Kaiserreich has a bunch of different ideologies. You got totalists, you got like 3 different socialist types, and then like 3 different authoritarian right ideologies. It's not just that, but it's also the mechanics you get with politics in Kaiserreich. Now, I guess it could lean more into the decision-making mechanics that Kaiserreich improves on, which we will get into later in the video. But I just have to mention how bland politics can be in Vanilla HOI4. You only end up having 4 different ideologies, that being democracy, fascist, communist, and non-aligned. And I just don't think it serves justice for the amount of varying different ideologies in our historical timeline. Granted, each of them has some little subtext below it saying, oh, it's conservative or liberal or fascist or national socialist, but it doesn't dig much further than that. And also not forgetting to mention, in Kaiserreich, you actually have to work towards getting a certain ideology that you want placed into power. I can't just switch to social democracy with one focus. You actually have to work towards it through several focuses and a lot of decision making as you encounter throughout the game. Whereas I feel like HOI4 kind of neglects the system and you just take like one focus and then boom, Germany's communist, for example. I just think it ruins the overall atmosphere of the game and it just sets a lot of things off course, which we will get into later. But overall, I think the politics system in Kaiserreich is way more fleshed out. Yes, granted, it might be a bit more challenging to get whatever ideology you want, but I think that's just what makes the game more fun. In Vanilla HOI4, it's just all about military and that's about it. Whereas Kaiserreich, it feels like a story. Yes, you gotta manage an entire army, but you also have to deal with the politics within your country, which just makes the world feel so much more real. But moving on to our next topic, we have the peace system. And I say that because in HOI4, during the peace conferences and negotiations, you have a lot of different things to choose from, whether it's take state, take over the economy of a certain country, or puppet. You got a lot of decisions, which sounds great at first, but really it just kind of makes the whole system a mess, especially with AI. Whereas with Kaiserreich, after a war is completed, you just go ahead and take state and that's it. But what they do better here is after you take a state, let's just say for this example, Belgium and the Netherlands here, as you can already tell I got them. Totally did not use console commands, by the way. You got decisions here to release them. And not only just the decision to release them, you can set them up as a republic or put the Dutch exiles back in charge, which I guess the monarchy's over here in Indonesia. But even after releasing them, we still have a ton of other decisions like to do with each separate state. We can go ahead and form a Belgian republic, a Belgian monarchy, or just liberate Wallonia and split Belgium into 2. And you can even go ahead and just assimilate captured territory. As you can tell, the peace system is very simplistic in Kaiserreich, which is what I adore. As you can tell, the peace system in Kaiserreich usually ends up being a lot more favorable and just a lot more cleaner. Most of the times when you see border gore, it's usually because of vanilla HOI4. You almost never see as much border gore, I should say, in Kaiserreich. Yeah, you get some weird borders here and there, but not even just border gore, it just improves the AI by a lot. Because I feel like AI and HOI4, when they try to take states and puppet stuff, it just gets messy. Whereas in Kaiserreich, the AI only has to worry about taking states, and that's it. Now, moving on to a pretty big topic, we have decision making. I've already kind of mentioned decision making here a little bit with the peace system and politics. And that's just one of the great things I think about Kaiserreich, is there's a ton of stuff you can do. We can manage our parliament here. So whether we want to get the SPD in power or like the DKP, but also just events throughout your time playing Kaiserreich. Say for example, Russia here. If we were to go ahead and take Ukraine and Belarus from the German Empire, we now get a bunch of decisions coming up here for Ukraine in flames because surprise, surprise, just taking a nation like that actually has consequences to it. And now it gives us a bunch of decisions here to make so we can try to lessen the impact on resistance and hopefully suppress them from spreading out to even more states. Just stuff like that in Kaiserreich adds so much more gameplay, and once again, it just affects the overall storytelling of the game. Granted, this might not be everyone's cup of tea, I get it. This is just opinions, none of this I'm not going to claim as factual, but just as a HOI4 player who has had quite a lot of hours, I have to say Kaiserreich just feels like such a fuller world. Which kind of leads into our next point, is AI interaction. Now I will say this is one of the lesser impacts Kaiserreich has, but I feel like just playing as any of the major nations, you have so much impact on the world stage. Whether interacting with minor nations, such as Russia on the Eastern Front here, or playing as the Third Internationale and trying to get any of these nations to flip towards any sort of socialist ideology. Whether that's through the Civil War here in Spain, or in Italy, or really just anywhere, you have a lot to do. And I feel like Vanilla HOI4 lacks in a lot of that. Now granted, Kaiserreich has a way more diverse storyline. Like in our timeline, there wasn't a civil war going at this point in Italy, so I will give HOI4 the benefit of the doubt that they don't have a lot to work with, but at the same time, they kind of do. We still had the Spanish Civil War happen in our timeline. We had the Winter War where the Soviet Union invaded Finland, and of course Japan still invading mainland China. There's still a lot they can work with, and I feel like most times when wars break out, it's just, oh, there's a nation at war, and then you can't do anything about it. For example, if you're playing as the German Reich in Vanilla HOI4, you can go ahead and take all of Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Memel from Lithuania, and the Allies just don't interact at all. Yes, they do get a decision saying they could try to fight the Germans on it, but they never take it. Because if you take it as France, you just go into a civil war if you try to stop the Germans from either remilitarizing the Rhineland, or you're just severely under-equipped to attack them when they take over Austria. I just wish there was more decisions in base Vanilla HOI4. And I feel like in Kaiserreich here, you just have a lot more interaction with the AI. Whether that's trying to prevent the Commune of France from taking Switzerland, which has multiple scenarios. Either France can take all of them, or they can get protection from Germany and join the Reichspakt, or even join Austria's faction if they go and join them. And there's even unique little decisions for Russia with the Spanish Civil War. Yes, you want to help the Carlists out because you have the same ideology, but you have decisions to just refrain from helping them because that might anger the Commune of France, who wants the CNT to win. Just stuff like that, and the attention to detail is just so amazing in Kaiserreich that I wish HOI4 had more of. I feel like playing HOI4 is just kind of jerking off by yourself, whereas Kaiserreich provides you with AI jerk assistance. Okay, yes, it's kind of a joke, but you get what I'm trying to say. But moving on to our next topic, we have balancing. I think Kaiserreich has one of the best balancing systems in any HOI4 mod. There can be multiple scenarios that end up happening towards the end game. Whether that's the Internationale getting really strong and just taking over all of Europe, or Russia getting really strong and taking over all of Europe, or both of them doing really well and taking half of Europe for themselves, or the Third Internationale getting naval invaded by the Entente, restoring the Entente powers into the west and the Russians into the east, or just a total German victory, or even a joint German and Entente victory, and even more. Obviously, you get the point. There's a lot of different stuff that can happen here. Usually each power has its own pros and cons. Each major power has its own buffs and debuffs, and I'd say they all have an equal chance at total domination. Whereas in HOI4, I feel like it just gets very cheesy at some points. But obviously, in our timeline, the German Reich did kind of go berserk. I mean, they knocked out France in like, what, 40 days? I don't know what the exact day was, but it was definitely less than a year. but I feel like there's just some games where the Soviet Union is just lagging behind and they capitulate within a year. And then I get some games where the German Empire can't even hold down occupied territory and it revolts against them. So then you have like no challenge, especially if you're playing as Britain or the Soviet Union. Like, it almost seems unfair that you're fighting a major power that can't even hold its occupied territory. Now, I will say it has gotten better over the years, especially with the release of Götterdämmerung. The AI fixes has gotten a lot better, but I think there's just still a lot of problems underneath them. But moving on to our next topic, we got mechanics. And this isn't just Yugoslavian mechanics, but this is the one we're using here for an example. In Kaiserreich, you can take Serbia and form Yugoslavia. Yes, a lot of fun, but it doesn't just end there. You get a whole new focus tree as Yugoslavia. Not to mention, depending on what ideology you go, you can get a different focus tree. Say, for example, you go socialist Yugoslavian, or maybe a more nat-pop Yugoslavian, or a more liberal Yugoslavian. There's just a ton of things you can do. But also you get more decisions, or I guess mechanics, where you have to appease each different nationality here within your state. And in doing so, you get better bonuses. Whereas if you neglect them, you will get worse bonuses over time. And this isn't just in Serbia. We also have Germany, which has the Mittel Europa mechanic, where you can invest into different stuff, whether that be civilian factories or military factories or production. And even later down the game, you can reform Mittel Europa to give different bonuses and benefits. Also, this could be its own separate factor, but I'm also going to include in the economic alliances that is present in Kaiserreich. I think it just adds a whole new level to the game. Because, for example, someone like Sweden can stay neutral, but is clearly German aligned because they're in their economic sphere. And with the Mittel Europa mechanic, you can change the economics of the sphere to give different bonuses to you and to the more minor nations that are in your economic sphere. I could go on and on for days about the different mechanics in Kaiserreich, but these are just two examples that I could really think of. But finally, moving on to my last point, the linearity of Kaiserreich. But now, when you hear linearity, you might think of it in a more negative light. Linearity as in being you can't do as much, it's a bit more railroaded, to say the least. Like, for example, as the German Empire, I can't just become totalist out of nowhere. Now, granted, I can become totalist if I play as the Commune of France and just invade the German Empire and set up a puppet, which, yes, does have its own focus tree. Once again, just goes to show the point of detail that Kaiserreich has is absolutely insane. But I think this more railroaded kind of game style is just a lot more fun. Granted, I might not be able to make the German Empire totalist day one, but if I were to make them totalist day one, it kind of destroys the world building. Like, for years now, the Commune of France has been wanting to restore some of its lost territory. Same goes for Russia. And then Germany just goes ahead and flips totalist out of nowhere. It just destroys the atmosphere. Once again, this could be a whole nother topic, but I'm just going to include it into the linearity of the game. And that's probably my biggest thing I think HOI4 should look into. Granted, this is probably one of my most controversial opinions, but I don't think every nation in HOI4 needs a separate ideology focus tree. If it were up to me in Götterdämmerung, I think the German Empire should have gotten different focus trees for different fascist aligned ideologies. I think it would have been cool if they made the German Reich have like 4 different fascist branches for different leaders, whether that, you go for the mustache man or Himmler or whoever. And then maybe a monarchist path too, because I mean, you gotta include Wilhelm II in. But when it comes to like the democratic and communist branches for Germany, it just doesn't make sense and once again destroys the world building. I know a lot of people might like including these, but I think if they spent more time on quality over quantity, it would just make HOI4 a lot better. And that's not saying Kaiserreich has less opportunities. As the German Empire, I can switch up to a lot of different ideologies, whether that's a coalition of all the right-leaning parties, or just going full on SPD, or social conservative. Whatever it is, you have a lot of different options here. But whatever ideology you go as the German Empire, it doesn't change the course of their game. They obviously want to protect all the territories they won in the First Weltkrieg. And that's what I love about Kaiserreich. And even then, there's smaller nations such as Bulgaria, where you can go several different ideologies, whether that's nat-pop, or totalist, or syndicalist, or staying more liberal. You can join the Austrians, the Germans, the Entente, the Russians, or the Third Internationale. So even though you might not be able to join any alliance as the German Empire because you're kind of stuck in the Reichspakt, at least with the minor nations, you can do that. Because, for example, if Bulgaria joins the Third Internationale, that doesn't really destroy the world building. Obviously, I could go on for days about Kaiserreich, but I wanted to keep this video simple and short. But yeah, that was just my overall opinion on Kaiserreich versus HOI4. And whether you guys agree with me or don't, please let me know down in the comments. Did I miss anything? Or am I just completely stupid? Well, please let me know. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.